You're listening to episode 243 of the Small and Supercharged podcast with Ria Freeman. I am delighted to be joined on this episode of the Small and Supercharged podcast by Dani Waldman, who you might know better as Flying Feathers. I was over at Spoga, February, and Dani spoke at Creator Days, and I was just completely captivated by her, not just for the fabulous feathers, but her whole story. And I was so thrilled that you said you'd be on the podcast. So welcome, Dani.
Thank you so much for having me. It's such a pleasure to be here.
I'm really excited about this. So can you tell us a bit about you? How did you start? Because there's lots of different threads to what you do. Obviously, the fact that you're superstar rider, but also the feathers and the story behind that. So can you just take us through the whole journey?
Yeah, I mean, basically, I grew up in New York City, and I grew up in a Jewish family, and I had always sort of wanted to represent Israel in riding. I started riding when I was 8 years old, and I had this like dream of going to the Olympics from a young age. And then I always wanted to do it representing Israel. So I got my Israeli citizenship later on. And I basically figured out a way how to ride getting in and out of the city. You know, in New York, there's no horses. So we got to go outside the city. And I just started riding. I fell in love with it. I rode for the last 30 years. I got all the way to the Olympics. And now I sort of have a different life, but that's that was sort of the journey. Started in New York and made it all the way to Tokyo.
I mean, that must have taken such a level of dedication, as you say, when they don't have horses where you live and you have to put that extra effort in. What made you just think, yeah, I really do want to do this? Out of everything you could have done, where did that determination come from?
Yeah, it's funny. In New York, like I grew up in a really sports-oriented family. So my father was a professional squash player. He was actually #1 in the world when he was younger. And my mother played semi-pro, or basically also pro squash and semi-pro tennis, and my brother played tennis, and I grew up playing tennis. Like racket sports was really kind of the family I grew up in, but it was always a really competitive family. And I just was living in the city, but was always kind of a country mouse and I loved animals and I loved horses. And when I was 8 years old, a friend of mine asked, "Do you want to come for a riding lesson one summer?" And I said, "Yeah, sure. I love horses." And I just sort of fell in love with it. And, lucky enough, my family made a big effort to figure out a way for me to get in and out of the city every day. And I changed schools as I started competing more so that I could sort of cram all of my subjects in the morning. And then I would leave around like 11:30, 12 o'clock every day from school. And I would drive an hour and a half to the barn. I would ride as many as I could, 5, 6, whatever I could fit in. And then I would drive another hour and a half back to the city, do my homework, eat dinner, and go to bed and do it all over again every day, So I was lucky enough to have that opportunity to be able to sort of follow my passion. And it took a lot of determination, and it took a lot of sacrifice, because in high school, I never really had a social life because all I was doing was riding. And then I went to university, and the first year of university, I was traveling back and forth every weekend. And it was hard because I really wanted to have that social life that I had never had. And I ended up actually stopping riding for like 3 years during college, because the first year I rode, and then I decided, you know what, I wanted to live abroad, and I moved to Australia for 6 months and lived there. And I got my pilot's license, and I did like a number of other things instead of riding for the 3 years to finish up university. But then the minute I graduated, I went straight back to the horses, and I rode ever since. So, it was a lot of time and effort. And even when I was a junior, I was riding, 14 to 16 horses a day. It was all I was doing. Like during my high school years, I would do school. Like if I was down in Florida on one of the circuits or something, I would do all my school on a Monday. And then I would just ride nonstop, 8 to 10 horses, on practice days. And I would show 14 to 15 from catch rides to my own horses on competition days, like Tuesday through Sunday. So it was a lot of just one singular focus for many, many years. But okay, this sport takes a lot of perseverance. If there's anything to do in this sport, it's persevere through the hard times, because there's more hard times than good times. But in the
Absolutely.
end, okay, it was such a passion. I loved it.
And then how did that take you to Tokyo? Like, obviously, the dedication, the fact that you're putting so much time and effort in, obviously riding for Israel. How did all that come about?
Yeah, so basically, I had always, even as a junior, I grew up in a really Zionistic family. And so representing Israel was always something that I felt a lot of like internal pride about. So when I had the opportunity to get Israeli citizenship, I took it. Basically, I took that opportunity and I said, okay, I'm gonna do this now. I never represented the U.S. As a senior international rider, only as when I was a junior. And then I got Israeli citizenship, and in 2010, I think is when I got it, and I started representing Israel. And for me, again, it was that sort of singular focus of like, okay, I want to get to the Olympics. So I tried to help kind of put together what would be a strong team and try to recruit other Jewish riders that had the opportunity to represent Israel, and then Israeli born riders, and we tried to put together the strongest team we could with horses and riders and coaches and supporters behind us. And then in, I think it was 2019, we sent a team to Russia to Moscow for like our Group C qualifier, and we had to win it, and we did, which was amazing. And by one fault, we won it. It was really crazy. We almost
Wow.
didn't. We had to all jump clear the last round. It was really a really hard fought battle to qualify, but we did qualify in 2019. Then, of course, the pandemic delayed the Olympics a year, but we made it there. So it was amazing.
I mean, it's amazing anyway to obviously get to that level of sport. But Israel aren't, perhaps correct me if I'm wrong, when you think of kind of like the big equestrian countries, you don't normally think of Israel, do you?
No, definitely not.
So is it quite hard to pull that team together to find everything to make it work?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, you're starting, I don't want to say you're starting from scratch, because there is a real sort of grassroots equestrian community in Israel itself. But it took a lot of convincing, of people thinking like, okay, well, we have a national level here in Israel and we don't have so many international riders. They're like, how can you think that we can go from this level all the way up to the Olympics? But there were a couple of international riders and friends of mine and colleagues, and we sort of said, look, we know we can do this. We're already jumping the highest level. If we're going to have a choice, instead of doing it for our maybe birth nations, let's all come together and try and do it for Israel. So it took a lot of convincing and a lot of coordinating. But in the end, it was a very passionate group of people that said, like, you know what, we want to do this. We want to bring something positive to Israel, because Israel doesn't always have the most positive sort of international exposure. So it was something that we really felt strongly about, and we all wanted to do it. So we came together and we worked together to pull it together. And yeah, in the end, we managed to do it. But even though Israel is not a country that you think of as having a strong equestrian sort of history, we do have now a number of top Israeli riders riding at the high level sport.
I think, as you say, lots of people see perhaps the negative news about things associated with Israel. So actually being able to really showcase some of the incredible things in the country must have been really amazing.
It was, and I mean, sport is such a great unifier, right? So we thought, if there's any way to try to bring some positivity towards Israel, sport is a great way to do it. And this was a group of Jewish people from the diaspora, and actually not even all Jewish people. We have a couple of Christian riders whose families were from Israel. I mean, everyone thinks Israel and Jewish, and it is a very strong connection, but it's not the only um, connection to Israel. So we were able to bring together people from the diaspora and just any kind of connection to Israel, and bring us all together. And it was a great thing, to be able to do that for the country.
And when you actually got to the Olympics, because even when you qualify, horses, bless them, they break, people break, things happen that you cannot control. And then obviously with the pandemic, that moved the whole Olympics. How was that? Because it must be such a roller coaster. The excitement, the fear, the stress, the panic. How did that feel?
I mean, there was all of those things, stress and panic and fear and excitement. You know, qualifying initially when we were in Moscow was really exciting. So that was sort of the beginning of the journey, because then we knew we had our ticket and we could go. And then, of course, the world collapsed almost.
Yeah, there was that incident.
Yeah, the world stopped. So the pandemic happened, and that threw a huge monkey wrench into it. And then them actually going through with the Olympics, and then getting there, and then the team being selected, and then personally getting there. And there was a lot of politics involved, and a lot of like drama that went into going. And then even just getting there was very stressful, so much COVID testing. And it was not an enjoyable type of experience, even though you think of it as the Olympics and the pinnacle of sport and you want that. It really wasn't, unfortunately, because there was just so much stress and so many athletes getting there and then testing positive for COVID and not being allowed to compete. And then the stress of the horses going. And, there was just so many things that went into it. And we couldn't attend the opening ceremony, which is such a strong part of wanting to go to the Olympics and experiencing that. And then, we had horse changes and rider changes, and we had, court cases that prevented some riders from going. We just internally as a team had a lot of problems and strife and just not pulling it together the way we wanted. And we didn't have that team camaraderie that should have been there, unfortunately, because it should have been such a great experience. But with COVID and everything, and we got there, and then I got there, and then my horse got hurt, and there was just so many problems. It was not the experience I'd hoped it would be. It had some huge highlights, of course. It was an experience just to be there in the Olympic Village, and seeing sort of the apex of our species, right? I mean, there were some amazing things, but unfortunately, we couldn't even go watch the other sports, and it felt like this very kind of stifled experience that should have been something amazing, and unfortunately, it wasn't.
But you still got there. And
I did. We got there, and it was amazing to be there and to watch the sport in the end. So that part was great.
No, and I mean, one of the other, obviously, that's incredible. I feel like I'm going to move around without my chat. But one of the other things that a lot of people know you for, obviously, the fact that you got to the Olympics, that you compete for Israel, is your incredible feathers. And this is something I've seen pictures of you with your amazing feathers, and the way when you jump over the jump and they flying feathers, incredible, but very unusual for actually any of the equestrian sport, because usually you're very, very traditional, hair's tied back in a bun, nets, everything is so structured. And then we have this amazing splash of color and something completely different. How did this all start?
That's a great question. And there's not like such a simple answer as to like how it just started. I mean, I think always in my whole life, I remember when I was a junior having to wear hairnets and the bun and put it up in the helmet, and always being uncomfortable with that. And then there was a shift at one moment when they started using more of the safety helmets, where the helmet company said, look, it's actually safer if you don't put your hair in the helmet, because the helmet actually sits and fits better on your head than when your hair is up in it. So I sort of saw that as an opportunity, and I was always one to kind of push boundaries. That's just a bit in my personality and in my nature. And I remember thinking like, I'm great. I'm never wearing a hairnet again. I threw out all my hairnets. I was like, I'm putting it in a ponytail, and I used to braid it out the back. And I thought, okay, well, the braid is at least a little bit more organized and neat than if it was just a ponytail. And then, as I got older, and even from in college and everything, I was always changing my hair. I had red hair, and I had bangs and short black hair. And, I was always changing it, and just, getting bored, look in the mirror and say, I want something totally different. Let me walk out the door and have no one recognize me. It's still how I feel. And, I had then started to dye my hair. I had pink hair. I had blue hair. Then I chopped it all off. And then I was looking to do something different. Again, just trying to figure out a way to be an individual and express myself, and sort of express that inner creativity in a way that I hadn't seen before. And so I was laying in bed next to my husband one night, and I saw a girl with a feather. And I said, what if I put a feather in? And he goes, what if you did? My husband next to me sat and looked at it. He goes, what if you did all feathers? And I like, it was like a light bulb went off. And I was like, oh my God, that's genius. And then I had this idea in my head of how I could sort of create what, okay, I didn't, it started with 250 feathers, small little thin feathers. And then it evolved like from there into what it is today, which is 3,000 feathers. And I change it every 3 months and I hand make all the extensions. And
Wow.
sometimes I hand paint them, and it just, sometimes I hand dye them, and I find them all over the place. I pick them up off the ground. It became this like way of being very creative, and yeah, it just evolved into, and I never like intended it for it to be some symbol or a movement or anything, but people started to see it as something representative of individuality in what is a very conservative, closed off kind of sport. And so then I kind of ran with it and I said, you know what, I totally agree with it. And I love that concept of own your identity. And then I saw the word ride in it, and it just morphed into this amazing kind of thing that people rally behind. And people started calling me flying feathers, like you said, because they kind of fly behind me when I was riding. And it just became this great like sort of symbol. And for me, I think they're beautiful. It's an expression of fashion. And yeah, it's just something that I have fun with. And it's like I get to make them and be creative. And then it's like wearable art. And for
Yeah.
me, I think that's really an amazing thing to kind of, I don't really think of myself as an artist at all, but I go outside every day and there is this concept of sort of performance art. And I really like that about it because I feel like you got to have fun in this life. Why not try to express yourself in a different and unique kind of way?
Absolutely. And what was the first point when you kind of thought, oh, hang on, this isn't just me putting feathers in my hair, being different, being individual. It's actually meaning something to other people. When was the first time that kind of struck you?
Yeah, it was really amazing. I had won a 5-star Grand Prix down here in Florida, actually. I think it was 2017 or maybe something like that. 2000, yeah, 2018. And I won a class and I was wearing an all white outfit and I had a white show coat on and white pants. And I had the bright, like flaming feathers, and it was the red to the orange to the yellow. And I had won it, and there was a lot of chatter online in the days following the win, which weren't about the win. They were all about the clothing and the feathers and how it was somehow offensive to the sport, to my horse. I got a lot of comments of like, you're offending your horse. And I kept thinking, I don't think I'm offending my horse. I'm not sure my horse even knows. But, just a lot of negative comments. And I went on to socials and I sort of was like, wait a second. I was like, you guys are coming after me. I'm like, one, cyberbullying, absolutely not okay. I don't need to get attacked for any of this. I said, I didn't tell anyone else to do this. I wasn't promoting it as something that everyone should be doing. I was just expressing myself, and it was just a pure, individual type of thing. And I said, how does this have anything to do with the fact that I won a 5-star Grand Prix? Let's talk about, how it was high level sport and things like that. And you're talking, and there was just a lot of chatter. And so I went on socials and I said a couple of things that sparked even bigger debate. And I got a very positive response to that sort of post. And I think the most memorable was a young boy reached out, and it was his mother actually sent me some photos and a long kind of response to it, saying, my son is 10 years old, or 10 or 12 years old, and he really wants to wear green nail polish, but he's afraid that his friends are going to make fun of him. And he saw you and he heard what you said and he watched you ride and how brave you were to sort of come up against people that were giving you a lot of hate. And now he's brave enough and he put the green toenail polish on and he went to school and his friends actually loved it and supported him. And it was this like incredibly heartwarming story that I thought, you know what? Okay, this is actually reaching people on a very different level than just wearing feathers in my hair and riding at the high level. And that sort of began that idea of own your identity. And yeah, and then I realized, okay, I can maybe try to make a difference in a way to more people that have nothing even to do with the horse sport. And and I think the biggest thing these days, is, we hear a lot about representation, and okay, obviously the feathers are not necessarily representative of any type of specific thing, but I think that idea of putting yourself out there in a way that is different than everybody else and just owning it and not worrying about the hate that you may receive speaks to a lot of other people, where you can connect with other people. And I think that that was the whole basis of the movement, is sort of, let's try to connect with each other and give each other the courage to put ourselves out there authentically and differently than other people and not be afraid.
Absolutely. Couldn't agree more with that. Were you quite surprised when you went online? You just won an amazing competition. You went online and there was essentially cyberbullying, not about your performance, not about the way you rode, not about how your horse was kept, but about what you were wearing. I mean, that's mad, isn't it? Because you were on a real high from winning. You open the internet and
Yeah. It was crazy. I mean, it was the weirdest thing, because I read it and then I was getting all these messages from people being like, "Have you seen what's going on?" And I was like, "No, no. I mean, I don't know." And then I'm a little bit oblivious to that kind of stuff anyway. I think it's why I'm in my own world and I just don't really care. But I opened it all up and I was like, "Whoa, this is something." And I was like, "This is a lot of hate and negativity." And I was more upset because I was like, other, not because of myself, because I can kind of take the heat. I was a little bit, I've always, because I've always kind of put myself out there, I've experienced enough of that over the years, of people just thinking that I'm a kind of a weirdo. So I'm a bit eccentric, and I'm used to people looking at me kind of sideways and being like, I don't understand her. But there was so much hate going around, and I was like, little kids and other people are reading this thinking that it's okay to go online and say how much you hate how somebody looks, and that they're somehow ruining the sport of show jumping. And in my mind, I was thinking, like, this is great. Like, we're getting more eyeballs, more people are watching the sport, people have something to look up to. And I was thinking it was a great thing. And I was reading all of these comments and these messages and these videos, and people being like, "This is so terrible." And I was thinking, how is this positive for like humanity? I was like, this is ridiculous. This is not helping anybody. So that's what sort of possessed me to go on and make a comment about it, because I was like, this, nobody needs to be reading this hatred. And it was just a bizarre experience, because like you said, I mean, this should have been about, high level sport. This should not have been about some clothing I chose to wear or feathers in my hair, and in the end, I mean, how do you say this, that like, the more exposure, the better it is for the sport. But negative exposure these days with social media has such a strong influence on younger generations, that there needs to be some backstop about it, and say like, hey, wait a second, like, we can't just spew everything that we have on our minds. Like, there has to be some concern and some, you know delicacy taken to how we say things, because people are impressionable, and negativity spread the way that it does, like wildfire on social media, doesn't help anybody.
no, it doesn't. And not the people even typing it. I mean, I do think when you see some
Oh,
of these things, you think, crikey, I wouldn't like your life, because, we can all have opinions about things, but then taking to the keyboard, typing that someone's going to read it is a different level, isn't it?
totally. And it's also crazy. I mean, you get people who type these things, and I think no one in their right mind would come up to my face and say these things. They hide behind the screen, and it's so easy to have a lot of like rampant thoughts of like, I don't like this. And but it's a simple concept that I think my parents taught me many years ago. If you have nothing nice to say, don't say it at all. It's one thing if you want to say something constructive, of like, okay, I have a concern about this, or I don't know if this is such a, and say something that has constructive criticism. But to just go out there and spew hate and just be like, I hate this and it's terrible and it's ugly and it's gross. uh, I mean, we all have those thoughts, but keep them to yourself. Like, those don't help anybody, you know. And no one would say that to my face. I mean, I can count on one hand how many times people have come up to me and said, I hate the feathers. I can't even count on one hand, because I think it's no one has ever, they may not say anything, which is what, basic decorum is. But somehow social media, there is no decorum. And I'm
No.
not saying, I'm not one to shy away from saying what I think and what I feel, but I take into consideration other people's feelings Whereas a lot of these people online say things and they forget that there's a person reading it on the other end.
And actually, I have to say, I've seen the feathers in real life, and they are marvelous. They are like art. The way they move when you move, they are completely like, I was transfixed by them when you were walking. They're amazing. Did you get any pushback from the sport directly?
Sure, I did. I got actually a personal phone call from the head of the FEI.
I mean, that not everyone gets that.
No, no. Now, okay, luckily I'm quite friendly. It was the previous head, so I was friendly with him, but he called me sort of in a friendly way, and he was like, look, he's like, I'm getting a lot of comments about this. He was like, do you have, a future plan about it? And I sort of explained to him, I said, look, I said, I don't believe that I'm breaking any of the rules. And he goes, no, he goes, I'm not calling you to say that you're breaking the rules. He goes, I'm just telling you there's a lot of chatter. And he's like, I just want you to know that not everybody loves it, and they think that it's lacking in elegance. And it then possessed me to go online and look up the definition of elegance, because I thought, is it not elegant? I think it's beautiful. So for me, it was elegant, so it was an interesting conversation. And I sort of said, look, I'm sure it won't last forever. And at that time, I sort of was thinking of ending it. And then after the phone call, I sort of thought, you know what, maybe I'm not going to stop putting the feathers in. And and then it grew from there. And the one thing that I said to him was, look, I said, I know your goal as the FEI is to try to grow the sport. I said, that has to be a primary and a major goal of the governing body of our sport, is to try and get not only more eyeballs, but more participants, more sponsors. I said, look, is it not a great way to create exposure when you can have something where we're not all cantering around? And my mother had trouble telling people apart and knowing which one I was. And then I put the feathers in. I said, and now you have somebody that's out there that's willing to be a little bit different, not breaking any of the rules, and sponsors and corporations and private individuals and young kids can say, oh, there's an idol, there's somebody that I can look up to and I spot them easily. Is that not a good thing for the sport? I said, the more press you're going to get, the more exposure we can get. And if I can be a little part of that, I said, I don't think that that's a negative thing. And he goes, you know what, in the end, you're right. And I agree with you. And then I never really heard anything else negative from the sport itself afterwards, because I think they recognized that there was benefit to it. And maybe not everyone loved it and not everyone agreed with it, but there was benefit to it. And I think that, I kind of stuck on that path, and everyone else kind of quieted down after that, at least from within the sport.
But I love that. I mean, all credit to them for actually picking up the phone and speaking to you and working it through with you, because as you say, we can get more awareness of the sport. Somebody winning a competition might not make a lot of online or in print media, but someone who's really breaking the mold, that's quite interesting, isn't it? Yeah. And that brings a different dimension to the story from all angles.
Yeah, and I mean, especially you talk about wanting like more, influx of capital into the sport, which is something we all need help. The sport needs that. You talk about corporations and advertising. I mean, companies want something that's a very visible symbol, and if we can get more individuality out of individual athletes, I think the corporations and companies and sponsors will come in and say, look, this is a great thing. We can capitalize off of this, and that brings in more benefit to the sport as a whole.
And at this time, did you have sponsors and supporters as well?
I did. I had a few, and the more that I went out there and put myself out there in an even more visible way, the more I got from it, because and I ended up getting a ton from it, because like I said, it was something they were like, look, this is great. Everyone knows who this person is. We can really, if our product or ideal as a company aligns with this person, I said, look at, they sort of saw me and thought, okay, this is something we can really work with. And then I saw it as well. I said, look, it's great. I can then promote products that I believe in and try to reach more and more people. So it was a huge benefit. And yes, I mean, I think I gained a lot from it. And I think the companies gained a lot from it.
Exactly. When brands look to sponsor riders, it is because we want that increased exposure. We want to be out there and be in front of people. And as you say, if something makes you different, so people are focused in on you, just logically, you get more eyeballs. So whatever you're using or promoting gets the eyeballs too. So it really is a win-win from a brand point of view, isn't it?
Absolutely. And I mean, you think about other athletes, Serena Williams is an unbelievable example because one, she's the greatest of all time. So look, she has her sport accolades, aside, but she was really one to also break the mold with Nike and doing, unique. She wore a tutu while playing tennis. I mean, these were things that brands, Nike knew that she would get exposure because of her success, but also because she was willing to break the mold. Lindsey Vonn, another one. I mean, there are even Misty Copeland, the ballet dancer, who really like bridged that line between sport and art and was able to get, I think it was also Nike did a huge thing with her. I think it was Nike as well. But, it's finding an angle with an athlete where an athlete is willing to put themselves out there and be a unique individual and not just another kind of faceless winner. And I think that is something that is very necessary in our sport. And I hope more and more athletes and riders will differentiate themselves in unique and individual ways, in authentic ways to themselves, but in also ways that then can really create unique type of images for brands and consumers to see.
No, definitely. So when obviously you got the online hate and you thought, no, screw this, I'm standing up to this. As you said, it wasn't just about standing up for yourself. It was standing up for everyone else, because if someone is being, a lot of people would have had that negativity and gone, actually, you know what, I'm going to take all the feathers out. I'm just, I don't need this. But you went, absolutely not. When you did that, you were obviously standing up for yourself but it was bigger than that for you, wasn't it?
Yeah, it was. I mean, it was that same thing. It's like I read that story of the boy with the green toenail polish, and then I read so many stories like that. And I thought, you know what? Like, none of these young kids and impressionable youth and even adults, I mean, no one needs to read that. And I thought, okay, enough with the hate. I said, I already put myself out there. You know what I mean? I was already the first in battle to get bloody. Like I didn't, it wasn't gonna, by taking them out now and hiding, I wasn't gonna gain anything. No one else was gonna gain anything. I'd already gotten out there, and I thought, you know what, now I'm gonna double down and say, I'm gonna stand out and I'm gonna be as bold and as fearless as I can about it, because I see that it's affecting other people. And I kept reading the negative comments thinking like, this is not, no one needs to read this. And I said, somebody has to sort of stand up against this, because our sport is already elitist and closed off. I said, we certainly don't need to be adding to that sort of fire by creating more hate and making people want to go hide back in their shells even more. We should encourage people to be themselves and express themselves. And I want expressive riding and I want expressive clothing wearing. And I want people to feel like they can be themselves, because for me personally, the more that I sort of put myself out there, the more confident as an individual I felt, as a person, I felt better about myself. And that really reflected then in my sport performance. And I thought, okay, we got to encourage this, because this is going to help other people excel more in their lives. And I felt like I somehow could make a difference. And that feeling of gifting that type of, awareness to others was far more fulfilling than even just doing it for myself.
Because that's the thing. Obviously, different is having feathers in your hair and looking amazing. But to other people, different could be anything, couldn't it? Anything that they think is different.
Absolutely.
That can make someone shrink back into their shell, not be authentically them, not show up as themselves, or not show up at all in some cases, because we don't get that fear of ridicule, of bullying, of everything is so big. We want people to like us. It's an inbuilt thing.
It is.
And it's so important to kind of lead by example and address the blooming bullies head on. So you put up this post and you said, I'm doing this now. The response to that, what was that like?
Yeah, and I sort of went out there and I went against a lot of the cyberbullying and I made this post. It sort of exploded from there, because I got so much positive response from standing up to it and saying that, look, cyberbullying is not okay, and attacking me for something that I was not saying to everyone you have to put feathers in your hair. I never would ever say something like that. I mean, this is enough of an effort, let me tell you. It's not something that I'm telling lots of people to do, so once I put that out there, then it just became this whole movement that started to make me feel, even like, I started to feel better about myself because I went out there more authentically. And it wasn't just putting the feathers in my hair. It was the idea that I could wear a crop top if I felt comfortable enough, that I could, I was training and doing like Krav Maga and all this type of self-defense training. I mean, I was doing a lot of things at the time that I thought, okay, I'm going to be out there as strong as I can. And the response was so positive. It fuels that sort of confidence. And I think that was something that I wanted to try to help impart on others if I could, because it started to make me feel great. And that was a really strong thing to happen. And it was amazing to be able to turn what was sort of a nasty situation into a big confidence builder. And then I kind of ran with it from there. So that was nice.
And from that point, obviously, you've got two hashtags now that are very much associated with you: flying feathers, for obvious reasons, and own your identity. So did people start using them? Did you encourage the use of them? How did it go from that point on? What kind of trajectory did it all take?
Yeah, it started to build and build from there because I saw more and more posts and people wanting to do flying feathers. And now, I mean, there are so many kids across the world. I've seen in China, I've seen in India, I've seen in the Caribbean, I've seen across the US kids putting feathers in their hair. Down in South America, I got something from a girl in Colombia like 2 days ago about putting feathers in her hair. And so I started to see little kids doing it, and it really, it was crazy to see sort of the response. And even over the years, it's grown and grown. But it's nice, you see these sort of hashtags and you see people creating a community around this idea. And I think that that's the strongest thing, right? Because the idea is sort of to have some type of self storytelling. So I was telling a story about myself, and then they were sharing their stories, and we were able to connect. And I think that that connection is what really bred confidence in people to put themselves out there even more. And that's really what I think the hashtags and the movement is all about.
Definitely. Now, flipping back to your riding life. So went to the Olympics. What's happened since then?
So I went to the Olympics, and then the year following the Olympics, the horse, of course, got hurt at the Olympics. So then he was out, my top horse. So he was out for quite a long time. And I had a couple of younger horses, and I had started to do a lot of other things anyway. I was developing a jewelry line, and I was doing the clothing line, and I was doing a lot of other things. And the riding, I didn't have any top horses. And as a personal thing, I really love the high level competitive sport. I'm a very competitive person, and I really love the high level sport. And I don't know, I was riding some young horses, and it was going okay, but not great. And I had a moment. I was down, I think it was like 11 months ago now. I was down in the south of France, and I was at a horse show in Saint Tropez. And it's about an hour and a half, 2 hours from Saint Tropez in the south of France is the Camargue. And the Camargue, there's this wild breed of horses. And I said, I want to go ride in the Camargue. And I had done it a long time ago. And I thought, let me go do it again. And I was out there, and I was riding sort of in the wilderness, in the marsh, on one of these horses. And we came upon like a herd of like wild horses. And I was just out there with one of the guardians. That's like the name of the guys who and women who actually like take care of these horses sort of in the wilderness. And I was riding, and it was so joyful. I just remember feeling like, oh my God, this is why I love horses. And I rode into the herd. I was sitting on one of the horses, and I rode like into this wild herd that we came upon. And they were all around me. And I was like petting all their heads and their necks and their faces and their butts. And it was just like, I was like part of the herd. And it was this miraculous experience where I thought, this is what I love about horses. And I hadn't felt that since the Olympics. The Olympics created a very like interesting sort of fracture in my sport oriented mind. And I found it hard to see a path forward because the Olympics was such a jarring experience for me. I remember thinking I had worked my whole life for this, and I didn't really like it. And I was there, and I was thinking, this isn't really what I want to do anymore. And I no longer had that goal. And I was riding around in the Camargue and I was thinking, this is what I used to feel about riding. And this is what I want to feel again. And so I had this sort of experience. I went back to the horse show. I was trotting around in the warm up, getting ready for some meter 30 class or whatever. And I was thinking, I don't really want to do this anymore. I said, I think I need a new life. I was like, I've done this for 30 years. It was a great run. And I want a new life. I want to do, you know, I feel old enough that I'd accomplished a lot, but young enough that I still felt like I had a chance to take a different path and follow some other passions that I had that always felt like they were on the back burner because of riding. And I said, I'm going to take it. And I just, from one day to the next, said, I'm going to try to have a new life. And so the last like 10, 11 months, I've been spending just trying to figure out exactly what path that is that I want to go on, and what it is that I love, and what it is that I want to do with the next 30 years of my life, if you put it that way. And so I've just been building a lot of different things. And I did launch a jewelry collection, which has been really successful. And, I've been working now with the horse show down here in Florida. I've been doing a lot of commentary. I've been doing a lot of media stuff. And I want to go sort of in the media direction, but still within the horse world. My husband and I still own about 600 horses. So it's not like I'm out of the horse world. I just am not riding. And now I go on trail rides and I have fun. And if I want to jump once in a while, I get on a friend's horse and I jump a little bit, and I just enjoy it and it's fun. But somehow I know more about the sport now, doing a lot of the commentary and the media surrounding the sport, that I know more about it now than I ever did when I was riding. And it's been very fulfilling the last few months. So that's sort of the direction I've been heading in.
And I was going to sort of flip back to the kind of ventures that you're doing. I've seen the jewelry, it looks amazing. And that was something that you designed.
Yes, with Karina Brez. So her and I did the collection together. It was a collaboration based off of one of her sort of famous designs called Huggable Hooves, and then with the feather. And she actually took one of my actual feathers out of my hair and hand drew the design for the ring based on one of my feathers. And they're fully customizable. And the idea is that you can customize however you want in order to express however you want to express yourself. And it's been a really great collaboration, and it's fun, and they're beautiful, and the response has been wonderful. So that's nice.
But obviously without the feathers that you've got and that identity that you'd worked really hard on, I would imagine a lot of these opportunities wouldn't be there, or wouldn't be as, designing a feather collection when you had no connection to feathers before would be a little bit left field. Also the fact that you are, before you even went off down the media path, you were a celebrity in the space. That must have really helped you when you think, actually, I don't want to do this anymore. I want to do something else. You're already so well known because you're your individual you. You're not just another person. Have you found that's been useful?
Yes, for sure. I mean, the personal brand that I was able to sort of build around flying feathers, and because of my sport career, definitely, holds weight when it comes to being able to promote other ideas that I am interested in, such as the jewelry, but primarily because I have a platform and I was able to sort of utilize that platform to put things out there and still get the support of people. Because again, the brand, like the personal brand of flying feathers, transcended just a sport career and just me, and it became this idea. And again, everything that I sort of do comes back to that idea of own your identity and flying feathers. And then I can sort of put products out there and put ideas that are all connected to that. And it's a way to sort of continue the movement. And the more that I stay sort of connected to the sport, that helps as well, because then, you're still engaging with people, and, having that previous personal brand definitely, makes it possible to go out and try to do something else while staying within the space.
And if you were to give any advice to other people who are, we know that the influencer space is huge. Lots of people want to be an influencer. Some reasons behind it, perhaps not quite as good as others, but whatever. What advice would you give people? Because it's a busy space.
Very busy space. And it's funny, actually, people always ask me, what does it feel like to be an influencer? And I say, I don't think of myself as an influencer at all. That was certainly never like what I started out, I never wanted to be an influencer. I mean, that was, it didn't even occur to me. I was just riding and kind of doing my thing. So advice I would give to people who want to come into the space is, don't think of it as, I want to be an influencer because I want to, have a big following. I mean, the number on the screen means nothing. It's all about actually creating a community about something that you're passionate about. And for me, it was just about, once Own Your Identity and Flying Feathers became something, beyond me, it was about engaging with the community about those ideas and what that meant to other people. So I think if you want to sort of go down that path, find something that's important to you and sort of stick to that and figure out a way to highlight those strengths of yours. And for me, it was being an individual. And then it was how I could, engage with people about them being individuals and encourage them to be themselves, not so much about anything with me. It wasn't from a selfish place where I was like, look, this is me, all about me, 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 and, watch the feathers and this and that. It was all about, look, I'm putting myself out there. I'm not telling anyone else to do it like me. I'm telling you, put yourself out there in a way that makes you feel good. So I think that my advice is really find what your strengths are and figure out a way to highlight them and tell a story around that and try to create community, because I think community around the human experience is far more what an influencer is about, or a successful influencer is about these days, than just going out there and putting pretty pictures up there.
No, that makes a lot of sense. Is there anything else you would like to share with us or add before I ask you all the places where people can follow you online?
No, I feel like we covered a lot today. It was great.
I've loved it.
Yeah, me too. This was wonderful. No, no, I think we said it all.
Awesome. Well, can you tell us all the places where people can find you and follow you online?
Yes, absolutely. You can follow me on Instagram at Dani Starwin. It's STARWYN. You can follow me on Facebook, also Dani G. Waldman and Starwin Farms LLC. And I am on TikTok, also as Dani Starwin, but I'm not active on TikTok, but I'm on there. And yeah, and you can also follow Karina Brez and Fearless Feathers for the jewelry collection.
Amazing. Thank you so much for joining me today. It's been a brilliant chat. I've absolutely loved it.
Me too. Oh, and one more. You can also follow me at Eurostar Equestrian for the capsule collection I did with them for riding apparel.
Oh, awesome. I didn't even know about that.
Yeah, so you can follow that too.
Thank you.
But thank you again so much. It was wonderful.
No problem. Thank you.